LottieFiles state machine is a game changer for animation. It allows your animations to respond to users' actions. So instead of just playing from start to finish, they can now react to clicks, overs, scrolls, or taps. Scenes in your animation can change smoothly based on what the user does. It's basically giving your animation a brain, making it an interactive experience. The best part is that you can do all of this without writing a single line of code. In this video, I'll walk you through what state machines are and show you some amazing things you can do with them. I've added chapters so you can skip to any section you like. Let's get started. For you to start using state machines, you need to log on to creator.lottiefiles.com. This is where you can import your own animation or use any of the thousands of free animations made available for you on the LottieFiles platform. This is what you see when you log on to creator.lottiefiles.com, and you can just simply import your animation here. Before we do that though, let's just go through some basic settings that are very important. So the first is to configure our scene settings. And if you look at the panel at the top right corner here, you can see some of the scene settings here. So the first scene setting is your canvas size. The default canvas size for Lottie Creator is 512 by 512 pixels. So these are in pixels. And if you click on the drop down menu here, you can see some other presets of canvas sizes. You can also set custom canvas sizes by just inputting the numbers here. So for example, if I want 4K instead of the 1080p preset that is here, I can simply put 3840 by 2160 here. And I will have a 4K canvas size. If you notice, my preview window is now all messed up. It is now kind of enlarged and I cannot see everything in my canvas. So for me to zoom to fit, you can simply use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+0 and then it will automatically fit your canvas to screen. Let me just change this to a smaller manageable canvas size for now. It is important to note that one of the advantages of using Lottie animations is that they are mostly vector files. So you can scale them as much as you want without losing resolution. So even if you use a 512 by 512 scene size or canvas size, once your animation is done, you can easily scale that to maybe 1000 by 1000 without losing resolution if all of your layers in your animations are vector layers. Sometimes we use images like PNG. In that case, you have to really pay attention to your canvas size if you are going to be using assets that are not vector assets. The next thing you need to configure in the scene settings is your background color. So right now, the color is white. I can change this to anything I want by just clicking on this little color icon here. Or I can simply make this transparent by clicking on the eyeball icon here. And this is now a transparent background. The next thing I need to set is the time of my animation, and this is in frames, seconds, and minutes. So if you want like a 1 minute animation or 1 minute timeline, you can simply just change this to 01 here. And now we have a 1 minute timeline. This is our timeline here. The next thing you can also configure in your scene settings is your frame rate. Currently, I'm going to be using 30 FPS, that's 30 frames per second. You can also add grid with the option here. Just need to click on this plus icon and you can configure the grid dimensions like how many rows and columns you want. But I don't want one now, so I'm just going to remove this. So once we are done configuring the scene settings, we can now start importing our animation or creating an animation native to Lottie Creator and then start adding interactivity to it. And these are some of the tools that can help us do that. We have the move tool here for you to move things around your canvas. We have the move anchor point tool here, which is equivalent to After Effects pan behind tool. We have the shape tool here. You can use it to create any shape of your choice. I can create a rectangle here, give it a very good color. And once you have any item highlighted, you can see the properties of that item on the right side of the canvas. You can do things like change the position of the item, change the size, and so on and so forth. You can change the color, the opacity, and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to delete this right now because I don't want to use it. Also, we have the pen tool here. We have the type tool, which is the text tool. We have the hand tool, so you can move around your canvas. We also have the zoom in and zoom out tool here. You can use this to zoom in into your canvas. You can use this to zoom out of it. And if you want to zoom to fit, you can simply use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+0. If you look to the left side of the canvas, you can see some other settings here. Some of the important ones are upload assets. This is for you to upload any animation, maybe in JSON or .lottie that you have and you want to maybe add extra animation or interactivity to it via the Lottie creator. Another tool is Discover Animations. This is where you can browse through thousands of free animations made available on the Lottie platform, and you can add it to your canvas to edit and use however you wish. For example, if I want like a like button, I can simply just click on like button here to search for a like button. Let's say I like this one, I can simply drag and drop it into my canvas. And I can start editing the animation to maybe change the way it works or add interactivity to this particular animation. Moving on to the timeline, this is your play head here, which you can use to scroll through your animation. And this gray line lets you set your in point. The other gray line here lets you set your out point. If you notice, we have a timeline that is longer than the animation we have imported from LottieFiles. So how do we trim that to fit the animation? All you have to do is set your in and out point, which I've done just now. And then you can right click in the middle of that and click on Trim Scene to Work Area. And it will automatically change the duration of our timeline from 1 minute that we've set initially to the duration of our animation, which is 2 seconds and 1 frame. If you want to use an animation that you've created yourself, say in After Effects, instead of choosing one from the LottieFiles platform, you can simply just drag and drop the JSON file or .lottie file of that animation into your canvas, and it will work the same way, just like we've dragged and dropped this particular animation from the LottieFiles platform. Alternatively, you can just click on Upload Assets here, and then browse and find the JSON or .lottie asset from your computer and then drop it into your canvas. But we are going to be working with this particular animation that we've gotten from LottieFiles for now. You can use some of the controls here to play back your animation. So for you to just play the animation, just click on play. The spacebar also works for pause and play in Lottie Creator. So I can click on the spacebar to pause and play my animation. Now let's add interactivity to this particular animation. Before we move forward, there's an important step that we are currently missing. That is, we have not named this particular project. And if you look to the top center of our canvas here, you can see this file is currently titled Untitled File. So we have to give it a name so it can be saved in our workspace. I'm going to do that just now. One of the important features of Lottie Creator is that it automatically saves your file as you continue working. So you don't really need to bother about losing progress while you work. You can also use the Ctrl S button to save the progress of your work. Now let's add interactivity to this animation. So for this particular animation, what I want to do is I want to make this the idle state. Then I want that once the user clicks on this icon, it changes states, it makes this like animation, and then it stays on this particular state until a user clicks on it again, then it goes back to the beginning state. So how do we do that? We need to first add segments to the animation. Adding segments to your animation is just a way of breaking up the animation so you can configure it to act based on interactions. How do you do that in Lottie Creator? It is very easy. You just need to click on this icon here that says segments, and then you need to add in and out point for your segment. So for the first segment, I want an idle state. I want it to remain in this first frame state until somebody clicks on this like button. There's an automatic in point here. I need to add an out point on this frame, which is the first frame of the animation. So I need to drag my out point and leave it here. I think a segment was automatically created and I don't want this. I'm just going to delete that and add my own segment. I need to do my in and out point again, then click on add segment. So I'm going to name this segment. It is important for you to name all of your segments so you can easily identify and work with them. I'm going to give this the name initial state or idle state. Let's just name it idle state. Then I need to create another segment. So I want this to be like from the first frame, that's 0 second and 1 frame, to this particular bit. I want it to be that once the user click on the icon, this is what happens. So I'm going to set my in and out point for that particular segment. So this is my out point, this is my in point. So whenever a user clicks on this icon, this animation will happen. This length of animation will happen. So I'm going to give that, after setting my in and out points, I'm just going to click on add segment. It's going to say from 1 to where my out point is. That is the 30th frame. And I'm going to give that like animation. I'm going to name that like animation. And I think that's that for that. It's going to remain in this particular state until a user clicks on this icon again, and then it will return to this particular state or segment. So I think that those two states are enough for now. We have one that will be the idle state, and we have one that will be the next state. And when the user clicks again on this icon in this particular state, it will go to the first state. So once we've added all our segments for the animations, the next thing we need to do is officially go into state machines and then add interactivity to this particular animation. So how do you do that? If you look to the top right corner of the canvas, you see the state machines section here. So you can just click on this to move into state machines. Don't mind this particular background. There will be no background in the animation. I think this is a bug with Lottie Creator currently. I don't know why it's adding background. There's no background here. Let me quickly check. So it is transparent. So you can simply just ignore this background here. It is not going to be in your final animation. How do I know? If you want to check what will be in your final animation and what will not be there, you can simply preview your animation with the Lottie Creator player. Just click on preview in player. You are going to see what it's going to look like. So let's go back to state machine and add interactivity to this button. So this is the state machine section, and there are some very, very important settings here that you need to understand for you to make the best use of the state machines feature in Lottie Creator. The first thing is the segment section. And if you have not created your segments in the animate section of Lottie Creator, you are not going to see them here. So you have to create your segment first, and this is what you'll be working with in state machines. And you can also create multiple states for the same animation. For example, you can make this a state on desktop and then create another state for mobile users. And for example, if you are going to be working with hovering, like you want somebody to hover on an icon and it changes, or you want them to hover on anything and it changes, that will work on desktop, but it will not work on mobile because there's no equivalent. There's no equivalence of hovering on mobile. So you can have two states. You can have multiple states in the same animation. And this is how you create those states, by simply clicking on the plus icon here. And you can delete anyone you don't want. If you look to the top right corner here, you can see some other important settings. So the first one is inputs and the next one is interactions. Basically, inputs are variables that drive your animation. This is what determines what happens at any particular stage. Let me show you some of the inputs that are currently available on state machines. So to add an input, you just need to click on the plus icon here, and then you can give the input a name. I'm going to call the first input click because I want users to be able to click on this animation and change its state. And there are 4 types of inputs currently available on state machines. The first one is Boolean, which is true or false. This is what we are going to be using in this particular animation to add interactivity to this animation, because we want just 2 segments, 2 states for the animation, and we want the click to be either true. So the user is either clicking on the button or they are not. That is true or false. Other types of inputs are events, numeric, and strings. You can watch some of my other videos where I've explained in detail the other types of input for state machines. For this particular animation, we'll just be sticking with Boolean. And I want the default state to be false. After choosing a name and type, I can simply click on save. If you try to create an input and it's not working for you, just like I've done, and for example, I'm trying to create the Boolean click input here, and it's not working. That's most likely because you created and deleted a state machine, just like I've done. So an easy fix for that is just for you to rename your current active state machine. You don't even need to change it to anything. Just use the rename feature and click enter to save it. Then let me try again to create my input. It works as intended. And that's how you create input for your animations on state machine. So the next thing we need to do is to drag in our segments and then connect them using this particular input. So the first segment we need to drag in is our idle state, and it is automatically tagged the initial state because that is where the animation begins, the interactivity and everything. The flow of that particular animation and its interactivity begins with this particular state, the first one you drag onto your state machine canvas. And there are some settings that are unique to each segment you drag onto your state machine canvas. To see some of those settings and edit them, just click on that particular segment and this menu will pop up. Here you can choose if you want to autoplay the segment, if you want to loop it, if you want to perform specific actions after that particular segment finished playing. So this is where you can do that. You can add on complete actions. You can add on loop complete actions. That means after, if you set a loop here, say you set a loop for this particular segment to loop, let's say 3 times. After that loops finishes, what happens? That this is where you can set that. So these are some of the properties of each segment. This is unique to each segment you drag onto your state machine canvas. You can also do things like reverse your animation, bounce, and all of those things. You can also just play that particular section to see what it looks like. Since this is like a single frame of animation, we will not get much out of it. So from here, we want to start adding more segments to our canvas and then connecting them using input. Let's drag on the second segment and connect it with this particular segment with input. You can just click and hold and then drag and drop it onto your canvas. This is a node-based editor and it is very easy to use. Now I can click on this to see all of its properties and then I can play this particular segment to see what it is like. Now let's connect these two segments using the inputs we just created. I'm going to move this closer to the first segment. Then to connect two segments, all you have to do is click and hold the red button from a particular segment and then drag and join it to the green end of another segment and then release your mouse click. Now we've connected these two segments and we can see how they interact. For you to see how they interact and like view your interactions and everything in real time, you have to click on this play button here. Let's do that to see what this currently gives us. And as you can see, it is completely skipping the first segment. That is because we've just added our transition. The line connecting the two segments is called a transition. We've added a transition, but we've not added a condition for that particular transition. So what is happening is, as we play our interactivity, it is completely ignoring the first state and moving on to the second state. We need to add a condition to the transition. So to add a condition to any transition, all you have to do is click on the line of the transition, and then this pop-up box will come up. And then from here, you can add a condition to that particular transition. Just click on add condition and some of your inputs that you've created initially will pop up here. So the first input we create, the first and only input we created is the click input. And then we can use that click input to drive this transition by saying when our click is equals to true, change to this particular state. So let's try that. Now the animation is playing again. For us to move to this transition, let's stop and play it from the beginning. And it is currently playing. And if you notice, it is not moving to this particular segment again because that gate is already there. This particular action is already there as a gate for this transition. So for us to move into the second segment and essentially play the like button animation, we can trigger the particular input that we created on this side, which is a boolean true or false. Then we can just change the state of our click from false, it is currently false, changes to true. And that animation happens. But what happens if you change this to false again? Nothing happens because we've not created a condition for the reverse animation. So how do we do that? We simply connect this particular segment to the first state again, the idle state. Let me move this on top yourself so we can see the transitions better. Now that we've connected this, we need to add another condition, another gate to this particular transaction, because if I start and play this, it is now stuck on the first segment. So we need to add a condition, a gate to this second transition. So we need to click on it, then add a condition that says return to this particular state once our click is false. So let's try that now. So it has started playing. If I change the click state to true, this plays and it stays on the last frame of this particular segment. If I reverse the particular input and changes to false, it moves back to the initial state, the first segment. So that's how you create a transition between two segments on state machines. Now this is all good and done. We've already completed the building block of our interactivity for this particular animation. However, we cannot expect our users to be able to access our state machines to change the state of this particular animation. So how do we enable them to change it on their own? we have to add interactions to the animation. Input are what drive your animations in terms of interactivity. They are used for things like controlling transition, firing events, and all of those things. But interactions are what drive your input. So for example, if you want users to be able to click on this on their phone or on their computer, whatever the case may be, whatever device they are viewing that particular animation on, we have to add interaction to this particular animation. So how do we do that? We have to go to the interaction sections on the top right corner and then click on this plus icon to add an interaction. Now there are 6 types of interactions that are currently available on state machines. The first one is click. Now this is just a typical type of click. You have to left click and release your left click button. That counts as a click. The next type of interaction is pointer down. You have to left click and hold down your left click button. That's pointer down, and then you release it back. That's pointer up. So a combination of the two, pointer down and pointer up, is what counts as click. Then the next one is pointer enter. This is the same thing as hovering. When you move your pointer over any animation or over any element of your animation, that is hovering over the animation. So that is pointer enter, and pointer exit is the reverse of that. When you move your cursor away from that particular animation, that's you've exited the over. That counts as pointer exit. I'm not really sure what this pointer move is. I'm guessing it's going to be something like scrolling, but I'm not sure right now. For this particular animation though, what we want is a click. And what layer do we want to be clicked? We want our users to be able to click all of the layers. So any part of this particular animation that is click, we activate the animation. So that is what we choose here in the layer name. The next thing we need to add is action. So we've created an interaction, but what does that particular interaction, this click, what does it drive? That is where we add our input here. So we are going to say we want it to toggle a boolean. Then we are going to add the inputs that we created, which is our click. And then we are going to save this. So from now, we can now directly click on the animation itself to toggle its state, to change between the initial segment and then the like button animation. So let's just do that. I'm just going to click on this. It changes to the like button. And if I click on it again, it reverses to the initial state of the animation. So that is how you create a simple transition between two segments using input and interaction. Let's say we want to change this from click now to hovering. We want the animation to change. Once we hover it, move to the second segment, which is the like button animation. And when we exit the hovering, we want it to reverse to this particular first state here. How do we work that? We have to change the type of interaction. So we can simply change this one we first created from click to pointer down. To pointer enter. And then we need to change this action from toggle boolean. Remove this, and then we add set input value. That means we want to set an input value with this particular interaction. So I'm just going to click on set input value, then choose our input, which is the click. Now we have to change the name, but this is just for example. We want to set this pointer enter to true, and then we save. Now we have to create the reverse. If that is what we want, for example, we want this animation to reverse once somebody stop hovering over the animation. Then we have to add another interaction here. Click on the plus button. We want to change this to pointer exit. The main scene, add an action, set input value, because we want the hovering exit to become our force for the inputs that we created. So I'm going to choose our input, of course, and then change this to force. So technically what we've done is once we hover the animation in place, and then once we exit that hovering, it reverses to the initial state. So that is how you change the state of your animation using hovering in state machines. You just create a pointer enter and pointer exit interaction for the inputs that you've created initially. But for this particular animation, it makes more sense to use clicks, because if you are going to be using this on your app or whatever, you want people to be able to actually click on this animation before it changes state. We don't just want people to hover the animation and then it automatically likes that particular content or whatever it is that you are using this animation for. And speaking of hovering, if you are using hovering, you have to be careful, because on mobile devices there's no equivalence of hovering. So if you are making animation work only on hovering, mobile users will not be able to experience that particular interaction because they cannot hover. It is more of clicks that are more active on mobile devices. So that is where you can now create two state machines. And for this second, you can call this state machines desktop, and you can call this state machines mobile. And here I can do the same thing I've done, bring in my idle state, bring in my like animation, and then connect the two using transitions. I want to, so after adding my segment to the canvas, I need to recreate my inputs and interactions again. So I'm just going to create one here, call it click, boolean. The initial state should be false, and then I can connect this particular state using that particular input as transition. From here, I can do the reverse animation. So let's test that out. So something is wrong here. Oh, I need to change this to true and this to false. Let's try that again. Now it works as it should. So for mobile, it makes more sense to just use click. So we are going to create an interaction for mobile devices and use click. Then add our action, which is the toggle boolean. Which boolean is it going to be toggling? That is our input, which is click. And let's try that out. And it works as it should. We can move back to this particular state machines. This one is for the desktop. Then we can start using the overing again. So that is how you create multiple state machines for different devices. For example, this is just a typical use case for using multiple state machines. If you have some interactions that you want to be limited to the desktop version of your animation, you can create a state machine for that particular platform, then create another state machine for another platform that you are working with. So this makes it super intuitive to use state machines on your apps or your website, whatever the case may be. Just for house cleaning sake, I'm going to change this input to overing instead of click, because that is what we are using it for now. Another thing worthy of mention is how to use particular layers in your animation to drive your interactions. For example, if you have specific buttons that you want to be clicked or you want to be hovered before a particular transition happens, instead of using the whole layer, like if I click right here now, if I start this interaction, I click right here, the transition is still going to happen. That's because in our interaction, we are using the whole scene to drive this particular interaction. So let's use a particular layer. So, but for that, I'm going to import another animation. Just going to create a new file and then import an animation I've made from After Effects. So this is the animation right here. I'm going to trim this particular comb size to the length of my animation. And if you notice, I have a single layer of sparkle right here. So this is just looking like that. That is not actually the case. And to verify that, I can view this particular animation, preview it in Player, and see what it actually looks like. And everything works as it should. But the Lottie creator does not currently support After Effects repeaters. That is why it is showing like this on the timeline. But in your animation, it actually works. So that is another point of noting. Sometimes when you import your files from After Effects, they might not display properly on your Lottie creator canvas. But once you preview it in your player and it shows properly, you have nothing to worry about. Your animation will work as they should after embedding it on your website or app, using it in your presentations. So this is just the preview for the canvas. It is not preview for the Lottie player, whatever player you are using. So for this particular animation, I want this actual button, this icon, to drive this animation. I don't want to be able to click here for this particular transition to happen. The first thing we need to do is to break this in. Like I said, in the beginning of this video, once you import from After Effects, it brings it in as a pre-composition. And for us to actually have access to all of the layers in this particular animation when we are doing our interaction, we need to break the scene, or else what we are going to see is the same thing we are seeing here. When we try to add interactions to this in the layer, we are just going to see the pre-comp or the main scene. We are not going to see individual layers. So that is why sometimes I like to break the scene. This is called a scene in Lottie Creator, but in After Effects, this is basically a pre-comp. So how do you break the scene? Just right click on the scene and then click on break scene. Now it has broken the scene, and now I have access to individual layers in that particular animation. Let me just create quick segments for this particular animation, then move to state machines to add my inputs and interaction. I've added the segment. Let's move to state machines to actually add interactivity to this animation. Now I'm going to drag my segment onto my canvas and then add my input here. It's going to be a click, a boolean, then connect my segment using that particular input. Let's try it out. So it works as it should. Let's add an interaction to this. I want to add click. Now if I click on this layer name, I can see the individual layers in that particular scene because I've broken the scene. Now I can use the empty thumbs up to drive this animation instead of the whole scene. Let's use the whole scene first, and then we'll see the difference between that and using a layer. So I want to toggle boolean with this, add my input, which is click. Then I can click on this corner here. It's going to work. The animation is going to change state. But let's change that to a single layer, which is the empty thumbs up layer. Click on save. And then if I click on here, it doesn't work. Nothing happens. If I click on this place, nothing happens. If I click on this place, nothing happens until I click on this particular layer. But another issue with that is since that layer is now gone from my viewport, I cannot click it to reverse this animation. So you just have to be careful. This will work best if you have layers that are not changing. Like if you have like a single button that you want to drive the animation to true or false, if you are using, in case you are using a boolean, sometimes you are not using a boolean, you are using other type of inputs. So for this animation, it will work best to use the whole of the canvas because we have layers that are changing. So from some layers that are present in a state, they are not moving to the next state. So if you are driving the animation, especially we are toggling a boolean, using a particular layer that is not moving to the next state, it will be difficult to do the reverse of that boolean to change the state of the animation. So for this, it makes more sense to use the whole layer, the whole scene. So you can essentially click on anywhere and be able to reverse the animation. But for example, if I just go to animate and make, let's just make a rectangle here, put a rectangle here, and we want the click of this rectangle to drive the initial state and the reverse state of the animation. I'll just move back to state machines and the buttons here. Now I can just click on this and then use that rectangle. This is the rectangle now. Click on save, and this will only work if I click on this particular rectangle. If I click anywhere, it's not going to work. The state of the animation is not going to change. But if I click on this rectangle, it changes. If I click on it again, it reverses to the initial state of the animation. So like I said, this works best. This particular method of using a particular layer in your animation, it works best when you have a layer that is present across all of the states of your animation. That's that for this particular video. If you have any question or you have any requests on state machines and Lottie Creator, please leave them in the comments. And if you want to see more advanced type of state machines, more advanced type of interactivity, you can check some of my other videos. Also, if you have any requests, like you are trying to work on any project that you are trying to figure out how to configure your state machines and everything, leave a comment in the comment section I'm going to try to get to all of those and answer your questions. Thank you very much for watching this video.